Colorado Territory, 1873. Rust-colored dust swirled across the parched landscape outside Silverpine, where the whisper of opportunity still beckoned to those brave or desperate enough to answer. The town stood defiant against nature's harsh indifference. A collection of weathered buildings, saloons with peeling paint, and the occasional glint of hope in windows that had witnessed too many broken dreams. Riding through this dust came Rowan Ingram, 25 years old with shoulders that carried more weight than his years warranted. His features, handsome beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, remained composed even as his blue eyes scanned the horizon with habitual wariness. The trail had carved lean muscle onto his frame, and the stubble on his jaw was light enough to betray his youth despite his efforts to appear hardened. Rowan believed in one truth above all others. Attachment was a death sentence in the West. He had seen it happen. Men who fought hard, survived everything the frontier threw at them, only to be destroyed by love. A wife taken by fever, children starving during harsh winters, sweetheart murdered by bandits. The pattern was clear to him. Survival meant solitude. You stay alert, you stay alive, he muttered to his horse, a dappled gray stallion that had been his only companion for the past 3 years. Nothing and nobody to slow you down. Yet even as he spoke these words, evening approached, and with it, a hollow feeling in his chest that whiskey and cards at the local saloon would not fill. What Rowan wanted was simple, enough money from the cattle drive to buy his own plot of land far from civilization. What he needed, though he would sooner be hanged than admit it, was something to make that empty land worth claiming. The horizon swallowed the sun as Rowan rode into Silverpine. His boots hit the wooden boardwalk with practiced caution. 3 months of driving cattle had earned him enough to afford a real bed at the Silver Spur Hotel, maybe even a bath. Tomorrow he would collect his pay, and then, what? Another drive, another dusty trail leading nowhere. For now, though, he needed food and rest. The saloon beckoned with its warm lights and promise of temporary companionship. Rowan pushed through the batwing doors of the Frontier Saloon, his spurs announcing his arrival with soft jingles against the floorboards. The usual scents greeted him: whiskey, tobacco, sweat. But something else caught his attention. A soft melody drifted across the room, cutting through the coarse laughter and clinking glasses. At the battered piano sat a young woman with honey-blonde hair cascading down her back, partially contained by a simple blue ribbon that matched her modest but well-maintained dress. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced grace, though Rowan noticed they occasionally stumbled over certain notes. What struck him most was how she continued playing despite these small mistakes, a determined set to her delicate jaw. "Who is she?" Rowan asked the barkeep as he ordered whiskey. "That there's Delilah Vaughn. 20 years old and too good for this place, that's for certain." The barkeep slid Rowan's drink across the counter. "Showed up 6 months ago. Don't know what broke her, but something did. Barely speaks above a whisper. Doc thinks it was smoke damage from a fire, but others say it's something else entirely." Rowan nodded, already regretting his curiosity. Other men's stories, or women's, were not his concern. He turned back to his drink, but found his attention drawn repeatedly to the piano player. There was something in her quiet dignity that commanded notice. The evening progressed as countless others had before. Cards, whiskey, meaningless conversation. Yet Rowan found himself watching Delilah when others weren't looking. She played for hours without complaint, though he noticed how she occasionally massaged her left wrist when she thought no one was watching. When a drunk cowboy stumbled too close to her, her body tensed like a spooked mare, though her playing never stopped. As the night wound down and patrons staggered toward beds or brothels, Rowan remained at his table, nursing a final whiskey. He watched as Delilah finally rose from the piano bench, collected what must have been meager payment from the owner, and headed toward the door. What happened next would alter the course of his carefully planned life. 3 rough-looking men blocked Delilah's path to the exit. The leader, a burly man with a scar bisecting his left cheek, leaned in close enough to make her take a step backward. "Pretty little thing," the man slurred. "Why don't you play us one more song? Private-like." Delilah shook her head, attempting to step around them. Her voice, when she spoke, was indeed barely audible from where Rowan sat. "Please, let me pass." The scarred man grabbed her wrist, the same left one she had been favoring all evening. Delilah's face contorted in pain, though she made no sound. Rowan later told himself it was nothing personal, just the code of the West that a man doesn't sit idle while a woman is mistreated. He was on his feet before he had fully formed the thought, crossing the room with measured steps. The lady said no, Rowan stated flatly, his hand resting casually near his holster. The three men turned, sizing him up. Rowan knew what they saw, a young cowboy, trail-worn but dangerous enough in the eyes to give pause. The standoff lasted only seconds before the leader reluctantly released Delilah's wrist. "Just having some fun," he muttered. "Find it elsewhere," Rowan replied. The men shuffled away, muttering threats that both Rowan and Delilah knew they were too cowardly to act upon. When they had gone, Delilah looked up at him with eyes the color of summer sage, brimming with emotions he wouldn't, decipher. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice indeed damaged, but with a melodic quality that matched her piano playing. Rowan tipped his hat, uncomfortable with gratitude. "It's late. You shouldn't walk alone." He had intended merely to see her safely to her door, then continue on his solitary way. But as they stepped into the cool night air, something unexpected happened. Delilah stumbled, her ankle turning on an uneven board of the walkway. Rowan caught her instinctively, his arms supporting her waist. For a brief moment, they were too close, and he felt the alarming warmth of human connection. "I'm sorry," she whispered, steadying herself. "My left side. It doesn't always cooperate." "You're injured," he observed, noticing how she favored not only her wrist but her entire left side. A sad smile touched her lips. "Broken, some might say, but functional." Something about her quiet resilience struck Rowan. Here was someone who had clearly suffered but continued forward anyway. He recognized that drive. It was the same force that kept him moving from town to town, never settling, never connecting. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "I have a small room above the seamstress shop," she replied, pointing down the street. Rowan walked beside her, matching his pace to her slightly uneven gait. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, which unsettled him more than awkward conversation would have. When they reached the narrow staircase leading to her room, she turned to him. Would you like some coffee?" "As thanks." Her whispered invitation held no suggestion of anything improper, just simple gratitude. Every instinct told Rowan to decline, to tip his hat, and walk away. Attachment was dangerous. Connection led to pain. Yet something, curiosity perhaps, or the unusual peace of walking beside her, made him nod. "Just coffee," he agreed. Delilah's room was small but meticulously organized. A patchwork quilt covered the narrow bed, and dried wildflowers hung from the ceiling beams. But what caught Rowan's attention were the drawings pinned to one wall. Intricate sketches of buildings, furniture, and mechanical devices. "You're an artist," he said, studying a detailed drawing of what appeared to be an improved piano mechanism. "I draw what I wish to build," she replied, lighting a small stove. "Before the fire, I worked alongside my father. He was a master craftsman." Her voice, though quiet, grew stronger when she spoke of this. "The fire," Rowan repeated, understanding dawning. "That's what happened to your voice. And your left side." Delilah nodded, her hands busy with coffee preparation. 2 years ago, our workshop burned. Papa didn't survive. I did, though some days I wondered why." She glanced at him with unexpected directness. "But you understand survival guilt, don't you, Mr. Ingram?" Her perception startled him. "Rowan," he corrected, avoiding her question. "And I'm sorry about your father." As Delilah poured coffee into 2 chipped cups, Rowan found himself studying her more carefully. Her beauty was understated but undeniable, golden hair framing delicate features that held both gentleness and determination. But it was the intelligence in her eyes that truly caught his attention. She handed him a cup, and their fingers brushed momentarily. "What brings you to Silverpine?" she asked. "Just passing through. Cattle drive ended. Heading out tomorrow." His answers came short, practiced in their detachment. "Always moving," she observed. "Never staying. Staying gets you killed out here," he replied before he could stop himself. A sad understanding passed across her face. "Or sometimes, it's the only thing that keeps you alive." This simple statement, delivered in her damaged whisper, struck Rowan like a physical blow. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, and the sensation was terrifying. "I should go," he said abruptly, setting down his half-finished coffee. Delilah nodded, accepting his retreat without protest. But as he reached the door, she spoke once more. The world breaks everyone, Mr. Ingram. Some grow stronger in the broken places. Rowan paused, her words echoing something deep within him. Without responding, he stepped out into the night, determined to collect his pay in the morning and leave Silverpine and Delilah Vaughn far behind. Dawn broke crisp and clear over Silverpine. Rowan collected his earnings from the cattle boss, enough to keep him going for several months. His plan was simple: ride north, perhaps try his luck in Wyoming territory. Yet as he prepared to mount his horse, a commotion near the bank caught his attention. A crowd had gathered, voices raised in anger and fear. Curiosity drew him closer, where he found the bank manager addressing the assembled townspeople. The investment was supposed to be sound, the man was saying, his face flushed. How was I to know Westridge mining would collapse? The bank simply cannot honor all withdrawals at this time. Panicked murmurs swept through the crowd. A financial crisis. Rowan had seen such things before. Towns torn apart by desperate people fighting over dwindling resources. It was precisely the kind of entanglement he avoided. He was turning to leave when a familiar whisper reached his ears. But what about those who need their savings now? Delilah stood at the edge of the crowd, her voice barely carrying. There are families who cannot wait. The bank manager shook his head dismissively. Miss Vaughn, your situation is unfortunate, but your father's deposit is simply not accessible at present. Rowan should have walked away. The problems of Silverpine were not his concern. Yet something kept his boots rooted to the dusty street as he watched Delilah's shoulders slump in disappointment. Later that day, against his better judgment, he found himself seeking her out. She was at the piano in the saloon, practicing a complex piece that her left hand struggled to execute. I heard about the bank, Rowan said, approaching the piano. Delilah's hand stilled on the keys. I had been saving to buy my father's old workshop. The new owner is selling it next week. Her whisper held resignation. Now I will never have enough. You want to continue your father's work? She nodded. I design things. Improvements. Solutions. Her fingers traced a pattern on the keys without pressing them. I could make a living fixing what others discard. Something about her quiet determination resonated with Rowan. Before he realized what he was doing, words escaped him that would change everything. I could help. Delilah's sage-green eyes widened in surprise. Why would you do that? It was a question Rowan couldn't answer, even to himself. All he knew was that the thought of riding out of Silverpine suddenly felt wrong. Call it an investment. I loan you what you need, you pay me back when you can. I do not accept charity, she whispered firmly. Then make it a partnership, he countered, surprising himself further. I have money but no purpose for it. You have purpose but no money. Delilah studied him carefully. Partners need trust, Mr. Ingram, and staying in one place. Her observation cut to the heart of his resistance. Staying meant risk. Risk meant potential loss. Yet something about Delilah Vaughn made the equation less absolute. 2 months, he heard himself say. I'll stay 2 months to help you get established. Then I'll collect my investment and move on. It was a compromise that satisfied his need for escape while addressing the unexpected pull he felt toward helping her. Delilah considered his offer, then extended her hand, her damaged left one, in agreement. 2 months, she echoed. Partner. When Rowan's hand closed around hers, he felt the rough texture of burned scars against his palm. But what struck him more was how steady her grip remained despite the obvious effort it cost her. The workshop they purchased 3 days later was a dilapidated building on the edge of town. Dust-covered workbenches, and tools hung rusty on the walls. Yet Delilah walked through it with reverence, her fingertips brushing surfaces as though greeting old friends. Papa built everything in Silverpine worth building, she whispered. Furniture, buildings, even the church steeple. When something broke, they brought it to him. Rowan watched her move through the space, noticing how her limp seemed less pronounced when she was excited. And now they'll bring it to you. If they believe I can fix things. Uncertainty flickered across her face. Some cowboys already laughed when I mentioned my plans. They think I'm too. She gestured to her scarred left side. Too what? Rowan challenged. Too determined? Too skilled. A small smile touched her lips. Too broken. Rowan found himself unexpectedly angered by this. People break things all the time out here. Doesn't mean they can't be fixed. The following weeks established a routine neither had anticipated. Mornings were spent cleaning and organizing the workshop. Afternoons brought Rowan's lessons in basic carpentry, skills he had picked up during his travels but never thought to share. Delilah proved a quick study, compensating for her weaker left side with ingenious adaptations. Evenings found them sharing simple meals, during which Delilah's whispered stories gradually revealed her past. How her mother had died when she was young. How her father had taught her to see the potential in broken objects. How the fire had started from a neighbor's carelessly discarded cigar, trapping her father in the back room, while Delilah had escaped with injuries that would never fully heal. "The doctor said I would never use this hand again," she confided one evening, flexing her scarred fingers with obvious effort. "But every day, I made it move a little more. Every day, I refused to accept his limitation." In turn, Rowan found himself sharing fragments of his own past. The yellow fever that had taken his family when he was 16. The years working cattle drives, moving constantly, avoiding attachment. He spoke more in those weeks than he had in years, drawn out by Delilah's patient listening. Their first customer arrived unexpectedly. Mrs. Peterson from the general store, with a rocking chair whose spindles had come loose. "My husband says it's not worth fixing," she told Delilah. "But it was my mother's." Delilah's whispered response carried a confidence Rowan hadn't heard before. "Nothing with meaning is beyond repair, Mrs. Peterson." Together, they restored the chair, Rowan's strength complementing Delilah's precision. When Mrs. Peterson returned and sat in it, rocking gently with tears in her eyes, something shifted in Rowan's understanding of value. Word spread quickly in the small town. Soon, the workshop filled with items needing repair, cabinets with broken hinges, tables with wobbly legs, even mechanical devices like clocks and sewing machines that Delilah approached with particular enthusiasm. One evening, as they finished work on a complicated grandfather clock mechanism, Delilah glanced up at Rowan with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. "What?" he asked, setting down his tools. "You have changed," she whispered. "When you first came to town, your eyes were always on the horizon. Now you look at what is in front of you." Her observation unsettled him. She was right. He had stopped calculating exit routes, stopped planning his departure. The realization sent a jolt of panic through him. Attachment was dangerous. 6 weeks have passed, he reminded her, his tone deliberately distant. 2 more, and our arrangement ends. Hurt flickered across her face before she masked it with a nod. "Of course. Your investment will be repaid by then." That night, Rowan lay awake in his rented room, troubled by the ease with which he had fallen into routine with Delilah. How naturally they had developed a wordless understanding in the workshop. How her rare laugh, a soft, breathy sound due to her damaged voice, had become something he worked to elicit. "This isn't the plan," he muttered to the darkness. "Get in, get out. No entanglements." Yet even as he reinforced his mantra of detachment, he knew something fundamental had shifted. The prospect of leaving Silverpine no longer felt like freedom. It felt like loss. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the workshop, the 3 men who had harassed Delilah that first night at the saloon. Their leader, Scarface, swaggered in with a broken rifle stock. "Heard you fix things, girl," he said, dropping the weapon on the workbench. "Make yourself useful." Rowan stepped forward, tension evident in his stance, but Delilah placed a restraining hand on his arm. "I can repair this," she whispered, examining the stock. "But my services are not free." Scarface laughed. "You should be grateful for the business. Broken fixing broken, there's irony for you." Rowan's hand moved toward his holster, but Delilah's grip tightened on his arm. $1, she stated, her whisper somehow carrying authority. "Half now, half on completion." The men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this businesslike approach. After a moment, Scarface reluctantly produced 2 coins. "Have it ready by tomorrow," he ordered, dropping the money on the table. After they left, Rowan turned to Delilah. "We don't need their business." "Yes, we do," she countered quietly. "Everyone's business. If I only serve those who are kind, I will never prove myself to this town." As she worked on the rifle stock, applying her skills with the same care she showed every project, Rowan watched her with growing admiration. There was a wisdom to her approach that his reflexive anger lacked. "You're building something here," he observed. "Not just repairs, but reputation." She nodded without looking up from her work. "A place where broken things have value, where they can become whole again." Her hands stilled briefly. Even people. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning Rowan wasn't ready to acknowledge. That evening, while Delilah was playing piano at the saloon, Rowan decided to organize some of the workshop supplies. As he sorted through a drawer of papers, he discovered a stack of her drawings, designs for specialized tools that would make work easier for someone with limited strength in one hand. Page after page revealed Delilah's innovations, clever adaptations that would allow her to work independently once he was gone. The realization that she had been preparing for his departure all along struck him with unexpected force. One sketch in particular caught his eye, a design for a piano mechanism that would require less force from the player's left hand. In the margin, she had written, "For those who refuse to stop playing the music." Rowan traced the lines of the drawing, understanding flowing through him. Delilah didn't simply fix broken objects. She reimagined them, finding ways to make them function despite their damages. The parallel to her own life was unmistakable. His thoughts were interrupted by shouts from the direction of the saloon. Instinct sent him running toward the commotion, where he found a crowd gathering outside. Through the window, he could see Scarface and his companions, clearly drunk and threatening the barkeeper. Rowan pushed through the batwing doors in time to hear Scarface demand, "Where's the piano girl? She was supposed to have my rifle ready." "It's at the workshop," as agreed, came Delilah's whispered response from the piano bench. "Ready for collection tomorrow. I want it now." Scarface slammed his fist on the piano, causing a discordant clash of notes. Rowan moved forward, positioning himself between Delilah and the drunk men. "You'll get it tomorrow," as agreed. "Now back off." The tension in the room thickened. Scarface's hand hovered near his holster, as did Rowan's. The standoff might have ended in bloodshed if the sheriff hadn't chosen that moment to enter. "Problem here?" the lawman asked, his hand resting meaningfully on his gun. Scarface reluctantly backed down, but not before hissing at Rowan. "This ain't over, cowboy. You can't always be around to protect her." The truth of those words hit Rowan hard. In less than 2 weeks, he would be gone according to their agreement. Delilah would face such confrontations alone. As they walked back to her room above the seamstress shop, an uncharacteristic silence hung between them. Finally, Delilah spoke. "You cannot solve problems with violence, Rowan." Her whisper held gentle reproof. "It only creates more broken things." "Some things are already too broken," he replied, thinking of men like Scarface. Delilah stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the moonlight, her scars were silver against her skin. "That is where you are wrong. I have never met anything, or anyone, too broken to be worth saving." Her quiet conviction shook something loose inside him. For years, Rowan had seen the West as a place where only the strongest survived, where vulnerability meant death. Yet here stood Delilah, physically damaged but spiritually stronger than anyone he had ever known. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you face each day believing in repair when everything around you is breaking?" Her smile was soft in the darkness. "Because I have been broken and remade. I know the process is possible." She hesitated, then added, "And because finding something worth fixing gives purpose to my own survival." The words resonated in places Rowan had kept carefully guarded. For years, his survival had been an end unto itself, empty of meaning beyond the next horizon. But working alongside Delilah, creating rather than simply existing, had awakened something he had thought long dead. That night, Rowan dreamed of fire, not the consuming blaze that had scarred Delilah, but a hearth fire, warm and contained. In the dream, he was building something permanent, something that would last beyond his passing. He woke with an unsettling realization. For the first time in years, he was imagining a future rather than escaping a past. The next morning, Scarface returned alone to collect his repaired rifle. The work was impeccable. Delilah had not only fixed the broken stock, but had improved its balance. The man examined it with obvious surprise, testing its weight and fit. "Didn't think you could actually do it," he admitted grudgingly. "There is a difference between broken and worthless," Delilah replied, accepting his payment. After he left, she turned to Rowan with unexpected excitement. "I have something to show you." In the back room of the workshop, covered with a cloth, stood what appeared to be a new workbench. When Delilah pulled away the covering, Rowan saw it was actually an innovation she had designed, a system of clamps, supports, and specialized tools arranged to compensate for her weaker left side. "I built it at night," After you left, she explained, demonstrating how each component worked together. With this, I can manage even larger projects alone. The implication was clear. She was preparing for his departure. The thought bothered Rowan more than it should have. It's ingenious, he acknowledged, watching her delicate fingers adjust one of the clamps. You never needed a partner at all, did you? Just the initial investment. Delilah's hand stilled. That is not true. She turned to face him, her whisper more intense than he had ever heard it. I needed someone who saw possibility instead of damage. Someone who understood that broken does not mean beyond repair. Her words penetrated the armor Rowan had built around himself. For weeks, he had told himself he was helping her establish her business, a simple transaction. But the truth was more complex. In Delilah's quiet determination, he had found a mirror for his own wounded spirit. 9 days, he said, the words feeling like gravel in his throat. Then our agreement ends. Yes, she acknowledged, turning back to her workbench. And you will move on, as planned. The coming week brought a flurry of activity to the workshop. Word of Delilah's skill had spread beyond Silverpine, bringing customers from neighboring settlements. Her specialized focus on adapting objects for those with physical limitations had created a unique niche. Widows who couldn't manage heavy tools, veterans with war injuries, children with birth defects all found their way to her door. Rowan watched with growing amazement as Delilah transformed lives through her innovations. A special writing desk for a man who had lost fingers to frostbite. Modified kitchen tools for an elderly woman with arthritis. A specially balanced saddle for a rider with one leg. You're not just fixing things, he observed one evening as they closed the workshop. You're fixing people. Objects and people are not so different, she whispered, lighting the lantern as darkness fell. Both can be damaged by circumstance. Both can be reimagined with care. As the end of their agreement approached, Rowan found himself inventing reasons to stay in the workshop later, to linger over meals, to extend their time together. Delilah never commented on this, but he occasionally caught her watching him with an expression that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. For days before his scheduled departure, disaster struck. Rowan returned from purchasing supplies to find smoke billowing from the workshop. His heart seized in his chest at the sight of flames licking at the wooden structure, and at the thought of Delilah trapped inside. He dropped the supplies and ran toward the building, shouting her name. Townsfolk were already forming a bucket line from the nearby well, but the fire was growing quickly. Delilah, he called, pushing toward the door despite the heat. A hand grabbed his arm. Mrs. Peterson from the general store. She's not in there. She's at the bank, settling accounts. Relief flooded Rowan, followed immediately by confusion. Why would Delilah be settling accounts? Unless she was preparing to leave? He had no time to consider this as he joined the bucket line. For 2 hours, they fought the flames, but by the time they extinguished the last embers, half the workshop had been destroyed. Workbenches, tools, projects in progress, all reduced to charred remains. Delilah arrived as they were assessing the damage, her face pale with shock. She moved through the ruined workshop like a ghost, touching blackened tools and scorched drawings with trembling fingers. How? She whispered. The sheriff approached, holding a broken lantern. Looks like this was kicked over. Found boot prints in the mud outside the window. He hesitated, then added, might be an accident. Might not. Rowan immediately thought of Scarface and his threats, but he kept silent as the sheriff continued his investigation. His focus was on Delilah, who stood amid the ruins of her dreams, her scarred left hand clutching the workbench for support. When the onlookers had dispersed, offering condolences and promises of help that Rowan knew would likely go unfulfilled, he approached her. We can rebuild, he said, the words emerging before he had fully considered them. I have enough saved to replace the tools, the materials, no. Delilah's whisper cut through his offer. Our agreement ends in 4 days. I will not hold you to more than that. Delilah. This was always a possibility, she continued, her voice steady despite its softness. Fire took everything once before. I survived. I will again. Her resilience humbled him. Where he saw catastrophe, she saw simply another challenge to overcome. Yet there was something in her eyes, not defeat, but a deep weariness, that troubled him. That evening, after helping clear the worst of the debris, Rowan found himself at the sheriff's office, demanding answers. You know who did this, he accused. Scarface and his friends. They threatened her. The sheriff sighed, leaning back in his chair. I have suspicions, but no proof. And Burke, Scarface, as you call him, has friends in high places. The mining company pays him well for security. Security? Rowan repeated incredulously. He's a thug. He's whatever they pay him to be, the sheriff replied. And right now, they're paying him to clear out small businesses along that street. The mining company wants to expand its offices. Understanding dawned on Rowan. They want Delilah's property. They've made offers to everyone on that block. Your Miss Vaughn was the only one who refused to sell. The pieces fell into place, the targeted harassment, the convenient fire. Anger rose in Rowan's chest, hot and dangerous. And you're going to do nothing? The sheriff spread his hands helplessly. Without evidence, my hands are tied. This is how the West works, son. Big money wins. Rowan left the office, his mind racing with fury and frustration. This was exactly why he avoided entanglements. The powerlessness when corrupt systems crushed good people. Yet instead of reinforcing his commitment to move on, the injustice only strengthened his resolve to stay and fight. He found Delilah in her room above the seamstress shop, meticulously laying out the few tools and drawings she had managed to salvage from the fire. Her methodical approach to catastrophe struck him anew. No tears, no collapse, just quiet determination to begin again. The mining company did this, he said without preamble. They want your property. Delilah nodded without looking up from her work. I know. They made another offer this morning at the bank. Triple what I paid. Her hand stilled on a charred drawing. I refused. Why? You could take that money, start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere safer. Finally, she raised her eyes to his. Because running solves nothing, Rowan. It only postpones the inevitable confrontation with what broken parts of ourselves need fixing. Her gentle rebuke struck at the heart of his lifelong strategy. Running had been his answer to every problem since he was 16 years old. Sometimes running is the only way to survive, he argued. Surviving is not living, she countered. I learned that in the fire. My body survived, but my spirit only began to live when I decided to build something meaningful from what remained. The simple wisdom of her words penetrated the armor around Rowan's heart. For years, he had mistaken existence for life, movement for progress. Watching Delilah face devastation with quiet courage made his own fears seem shallow by comparison. What will you do? He asked. Begin again, she replied simply. One repair at a time. That night, Rowan made a decision. Without telling Delilah, he sought out Burke at the saloon, finding him predictably boasting at the bar about his latest intimidations. I want to talk, Rowan said, maintaining careful control over his anger. Burke smirked. Nothing to talk about, cowboy. Your time in town's almost up, from what I hear. Outside, Rowan insisted, leading the way through the batwing doors. In the shadowed street, Rowan faced the man directly. I know you set the fire. I know the mining company is paying you to clear that block. Burke's hand drifted toward his gun. Accusations like that get men killed out here. I'm not here to fight, Rowan replied, though every instinct screamed for retribution. I'm here to make a deal. This caught Burke by surprise. What kind of deal? I have savings. More than the mining company is paying you. Walk away from Delilah's workshop, and it's yours. Burke's eyes narrowed with calculation. Why would you do that for a crippled whisper of a woman? The question struck directly at what Rowan had been avoiding acknowledging. Why indeed would he sacrifice everything for Delilah? The answer came with unexpected clarity. Because some things are worth staying for, he said, the truth of it settling in his bones. Now, do we have a deal? 3 days later, one day before Rowan's scheduled departure, he stood with Delilah in the half-ruined workshop. Repairs had begun, with several townspeople offering assistance after hearing of Burke's sudden departure from Silverpine. It's strange, Delilah whispered as they sorted through salvageable materials. Burke returned my payment for his rifle, said he was moving on to better opportunities. Her perceptive eyes studied Rowan's face. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Rowan focused on straightening a bent saw blade. Maybe he found something worth fixing elsewhere. Delilah's hand, her scarred left one, reached out to still his work. Rowan, she said, her whisper demanding truth. What did you do? He finally met her gaze. What was necessary? Understanding dawned in her eyes. Your savings. The money you've been working for all these years. Her voice held both gratitude and dismay. Why would you sacrifice that? The question demanded an honesty Rowan had been avoiding. Standing amid the charred remains of Delilah's dreams, with her searching eyes upon him, pretense became impossible. Because watching you rebuild after everything you've lost made me realize how little I've built at all, he admitted. All these years running, and I have nothing to show for it, but money and memories I'd rather forget. Tears shimmered in Delilah's sage-green eyes. And now you have neither. I have something better, he said quietly. A chance to build something that matters. The vulnerability of the moment terrified him. Tomorrow was his scheduled departure, the escape route he had clung to throughout their partnership. Yet the thought of riding away now seemed more painful than any risk of staying. Our agreement ends tomorrow, Delilah whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet workshop. You'll be free to go. And if I don't want to? The words escaped before Rowan could contain them. Delilah's breath caught, hope and fear mingling in her expression. Why would you stay? There's nothing but hard work and uncertainty here. There's you, he said simply. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. For years, Rowan had believed detachment was a death sentence in the West. Yet standing before Delilah, he realized that detachment had been the real threat to his survival. Not physical death, but a life devoid of meaning. Before Delilah could respond, the door to the workshop burst open. The sheriff stood there, his expression grim. Burke's back, he announced. With friends from the mining company. They're claiming you assaulted him, Ingram. They've come to arrest you. Or worse. Outside, horses approached, at least 5 riders, judging by the sound. Rowan's hand moved instinctively to his gun. No, Delilah said firmly, placing her hand over his. No more violence. They're not here to talk, Delilah, the sheriff warned. The mining company wants this property, and they're tired of waiting. Rowan faced a choice that crystallized everything he believed about survival in the West. Fight or flee, the options he had always understood. Yet Delilah's steady gaze suggested a third path he had never considered. Trust me, she whispered, squeezing his hand. Against every instinct honed by years on the frontier, Rowan nodded. Delilah turned to the sheriff. Let them come in. All of them. Minutes later, the workshop filled with men, Burke, 3 mining company representatives in expensive suits, and 2 hired guns whose hands hovered near their holsters. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Mr. Ingram, the lead representative began, a tall man with cold eyes and a ledger tucked under his arm. You've interfered with company business. That's a serious matter. Your business seems to include arson and intimidation, Rowan replied evenly. The man smiled thinly. Accusations without proof are slander, sir. But we're willing to overlook your indiscretions if the property matter is resolved today. All eyes turned to Delilah, who stood amid the charred ruins of her workshop with surprising dignity. Gentlemen, she began, her whisper somehow commanding the attention of everyone present. You have tried to drive me away with threats. With fire. She gestured to the damaged building around them. Yet here I remain. Miss Vaughn, the mining representative said condescendingly, be reasonable. This location is valuable to the company's expansion. We've offered generous compensation. This workshop is not for sale, Delilah replied. Not at any price. The man's expression hardened. Then perhaps we should discuss Mr. Ingram's assault on our employee. Sheriff, I believe you have a duty to arrest this man. The sheriff looked uncomfortable, but stepped forward. Rowan tensed, calculating odds that were decidedly not in his favor. Before you take action, Delilah interjected, you should know that I have documentation of the mining company's activities. From her pocket, she withdrew several folded papers, including witness statements regarding the fire, financial records of payments to Mr. Burke, and correspondence about removing obstacles from company property. The mining representative's face paled visibly. Where did you get those? From your office, Delilah answered calmly. While settling accounts at the bank yesterday, I overheard your clerk discussing the fire with another employee. It seems your company keeps meticulous records, including of its illegal activities. It was a bluff. Rowan could tell by the slight tremor in her hand, but a masterful one. The mining men exchanged alarmed glances. These documents have been entrusted to my attorney in Denver, Delilah continued, her whisper steady despite its softness. Any action against Mr. Ingram or myself will result in their immediate submission to territorial authorities and newspapers. The standoff stretched into tense silence. Finally, the mining representative closed his ledger with a snap. It appears we have misunderstood each other, Miss Vaughn. Perhaps we can discuss terms that would be mutually beneficial. The only terms I will accept are these, Delilah replied. You will leave my property alone. You will compensate me for fire damages. And you will find another location for your expansion, one not built on intimidation. The negotiation that followed revealed a side of Delilah that Rowan had glimpsed but never fully appreciated, a strategic mind as precise as her mechanical designs. By the time the mining representatives left, she had secured not only their agreement to her terms, but also contracts for her to design specialized equipment for their operations. When only Rowan and Delilah remained in the workshop, he turned to her in amazement. There were no documents, were there? A smile touched her lips. Only the designs I salvaged from the fire. But they didn't know that. You outplayed them at their own game, he said with growing admiration. I simply understood what parts needed repair, she replied. Their greed. Their fear of exposure. All mechanisms respond to the right adjustments. In that moment, looking at Delilah amid the ruins she had defended with nothing but courage and quick thinking, Rowan recognized a fundamental truth. His belief that attachment was weakness had been precisely backward. His isolation had been the real vulnerability. Delilah's connections, to place, to purpose, to people, were her true strength. Our agreement ends tomorrow, he said quietly. Delilah nodded, her expression carefully neutral. You fulfilled your obligation. More than fulfilled it. I want a new agreement, Rowan continued, taking a step toward her. Not as business partners. Something more permanent. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly guarded. What kind of agreement? One where I stop running. Where I build something lasting. He took her scarred hand in his. With you, if you'll have me. Delilah's breath caught, emotion making her whisper even softer. Rowan, I have nothing to offer but hard work and uncertainty. You have everything to offer, he countered. You showed me that survival means nothing without purpose. That movement isn't the same as living. His voice roughened with emotion. For years I thought I was protecting myself by avoiding connection. But watching you face loss with courage made me realize I wasn't living at all, just existing. Tears slipped down Delilah's cheeks, silver in the late afternoon light. Are you certain? The West breaks people, Rowan. It could break us. He smiled, understanding flowing through him. Maybe, but some things grow stronger in the broken places. As Rowan drew her closer, Delilah whispered words that completed his transformation from lone survivor to man with purpose. I can fix you too. Their kiss was gentle, a promise exchanged amid the ruins of one dream and the foundation of another. When they parted, Rowan saw in Delilah's eyes the future he had always feared to imagine, one rooted in place, in commitment, in the courage to build rather than flee. 6 months later, the workshop had been fully restored and expanded. Vaughn and Ingram Restorations read the freshly painted sign, with the subtitle, Specializing in Adaptive Designs and Innovative Repairs. Inside, Rowan worked alongside his wife, their hands moving in practiced harmony as they transformed broken objects into functional beauty. Delilah's innovations had gained regional recognition, bringing orders from as far away as Denver and San Francisco. The workshop had become more than a business. It was a gathering place for those the frontier had damaged but not defeated. Veterans learning to use tools with missing limbs. Children with birth defects discovering they could create despite differences. Widows finding independence through adapted implements. On the wall hung Delilah's favorite drawing, the design for a specialized piano mechanism that now allowed her to play with renewed confidence at church services and special occasions. Beside it hung a newer sketch, plans for a cradle with special features that anticipated the needs of parents who might have only one strong arm to rock a child. 3 more months, Rowan said, coming up behind Delilah as she studied the cradle design. His hand rested gently on her growing belly, where their first child developed. She leaned back against him, her whisper warm with contentment. Are you nervous? Terrified, he admitted with a smile. But not in the way I used to be. How so? She asked, turning in his arms. I used to fear attachment because it might be lost, he explained. Now I understand that even if the worst happens, what we've built here has meaning that outlasts us. Delilah's scarred hand came up to touch his face. From running to building. Quite a transformation, Mr. Ingram. I had an excellent teacher in restoration, Mrs. Ingram, he replied, covering her hand with his own. Outside, Silverpine continued its frontier existence. Harsh, unpredictable, sometimes dangerous. But within the workshop, something extraordinary had taken root. Not an escape from the realities of the West, but a defiant assertion that broken things, and people, could be reimagined, repurposed, reborn. Rowan Ingram, who had once believed attachment was a death sentence, now understood it was the only thing that had ever truly made him alive. In Delilah's quiet strength, he had found not weakness, but a resilience that transformed survival into living, existence into purpose. And in the workshop they had built together, among the tools and designs and people they helped each day, a simple truth was demonstrated over and over. The world might break everything eventually, but with patience, skill, and love, the broken places could become the strongest parts of all.